Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, there we go. As advertised, I'm John Morley, a wizard of the digital realm. In plain English, that means I'm an external consultant with a focus on articulate storyline. In short, an ID for hire. And I wrote a book, Script Writing for High Impact Videos. It's a good book. After earning a degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Florida, go Gators, I worked in film and video production before evolving into more writing and instructional design. These are most of the companies that I have worked for, either on staff or as an external. And I swing both ways, which is to say I have and continue developing both soft and hard skills learning support. That's me. Who are you? I'm going to run a quick poll here if I can figure out which button to push. And this is a multiple select. If you would just let me know what your role is. And I understand some people are more than one role, so feel free to select several of these. It looks like we have a horse race here between instructional designers and trainers. Also have a training manager among us. This is all very good. This is specifically directed to instructional designers, although trainers can learn a lot about how the brains of learners work. And the last few segments are specifically directed to trainers and training managers. This will help you understand why does it always take so much time. So let's end that poll, and I will ask you to imagine, if you will, you're shopping for an appliance or a high-end electronics, and you don't know about this, so you're doing research, and in the process, you see the suggestion to watch a tutorial on how to configure and operate a user interface. Imagine what your response to that suggestion would be. I would think it would probably be along the line of, are you kidding? You want me to waste my time and brain cells on some technical minutia I may never need? Now, fast forward here to the scene in your movie where you're basking in the glow of your new possession. Now you want that tutorial, but do you want it to start with a bunch of marketing hype about what a great product it is, what a great company it comes from, and all of that kind of marketing fluff? Probably not. What you want at this point is this. This is technical training. You may already understand that learning is a continuing process rather than a one-time training event. And that process can be summarized as what you see on the screen there. I will assume that you are literate, so I don't have to read it to you. This also happens to be the outline for this presentation. So you will be seeing this again as we go along. But first, what's different about technical training? This refers to Dr. Bloom's learning domains. Cognitive is stuff you know, affective, how you feel about stuff, and psychomotor is the physical kind of stuff you can do. Now, soft skills training is often about values and beliefs. If you have managers who are too autocratic, not mindful, you have work to do in the affective domain. Technical training, on the other hand, is mostly in the cognitive and psychomotors domain. You don't care if your learners are autocrats or pussycats. You just want them to be able to do the job. Now, if you're sitting there about ready to jump up and down and yell, but they gotta wanna, you are right. If you have reason to believe your audience is going to be skeptical, even antagonistic, maybe just unprepared, they better get some communications and get it good. But that is a different project. That is in the affective domain, affecting how they value this specific training, and you would want to encourage them to believe that they want it. Kind of like in the opening exercise, at least in real life, going through all the thinking about these new things you're going to learn, that would make you hungry for wanting to know how to get the best from them. Get your audience eager for this training needs to be done at a different time. And then when the technical training rolls, just tell them what to do. The good news is that learners are often more motivated for technical training. For soft skills training, the attitude may be, I already know how to do my job. Why do you have to send me off to charm school? By the same token, it's often an easier sell to management. Management, at least most management, understands if you want workers to do something, you better tell them what it is and how to do it. In different respects, technical training is both less and more complex than soft skills training. Humans are complicated, so soft skills training often involves psychology. And the answer to so many issues in psychology is it depends. There is no right answer. In tech training, there usually is a right answer. The pH has to be in a certain range. Yes, you need to wear certain PPE. No, you can't do the steps out of order. But in some instances, technical training is more complex. In soft skills training, particularly compliance, it's often a single point lesson. Treat the ladies with respect. Diversity is good. Be less autocratic. You don't have to write that down to remember you're supposed to do it. However, in technical training, there may be many steps to be remembered. There may be a lot to know about each and every step. So there's complexity in just the volume of stuff the learner needs to retain. There's also a lot that's the same between soft skills and hard skills training. Learners today are informed, informal, and in a hurry. Being informed, they already know stuff. In the collateral I mentioned earlier, there are interview questions to use with the client or SME. Most important is what's first here. Who is the audience? What do they already know? What are their concerns? What are their motivators? And in some cases, you may have very different audiences for the same presentation. This is an example of training on a industrial level centrifuge. Some of the audience will have already been using the existing centrifuge. Others, particularly new hires, don't have a clue. So I allow them to self-select in which audience they are. If they are not experienced, it goes to the very basics of how this centrifuge works. No assumed knowledge. If they are experienced, most of this is contrast and comparison with the old centrifuge, how the new one looks different on screen, how you even have different terminology in referring to the different centrifuges. What do you suppose the capacity is of short-term memory? It used to be considered 5 items plus or minus 2. More recent studies have shown it to be 3 items plus or minus 2. So the take home here is data dumps don't work. Once you get past a few salient points, it's kind of like trying to pour a pitcher of water into a 10-ounce glass. It's a waste of resources, and it may create a mess in the brain of the learner. So what to do? That is a technical term. Chunking simply means breaking down content into easily understood and reinforced information. This is how we learn. As I mentioned, we already know stuff, and we have to understand something before we can remember it. What is the capacity for understanding? That would be the capacity of our short-term memory, as well as what we already know. Once we understand something, it needs to be reinforced with effortful recall using, say, review questions or exercises. Then with additional practice, we're smarter. Brains, the purported food source of zombies, can also be found in many learners. Neuroscience tells us that things are remembered by forming neural pathways in the brain. Neurons connect with an actual chemical process. So when a learner learns something, that creates a faint neural pathway, or more likely multiple neural pathways to other things that are already in the learner's brain. So you get this web sort of situation that you are seeing here. Another way to reinforce the neural pathways that cost absolutely nothing and doesn't take much effort from instructional designers is something we call sleep. And don't take my word for it. There are multiple studies out there showing that learning is better retained if it's spaced out, especially if some of those spaces are actual sleep. Humans are pattern-seeking animals. By patterns, I mean something like songs, poems, diagrams, process flows. For example, I know my ABCs and I have known them most of my life. Yet if somebody asks me cold, what comes first, the J or H? I would probably have to sing, probably to myself, A, B, C, D, E, F, because that is a pattern. That is a neural pathway that I have reinforced during most of my life. I can remember that. But a cold fact like, does J or H come first? Not so much. So the take home here is when you present a task or a job in one pattern, and then if you go back and discuss different aspects of that task or job as abstract random facts, the learner's brain, whether consciously or not, is going, wait, stop. I've got cognitive dissonance. That thing you said first is over here, and the thing in the middle is over here. What's happening is the learner's brain is trying to create a new neural pathway, a new pattern to take in these random facts, and that is competing with the neural network, the uh, pattern that you want to reinforce. It's competing rather than reinforcing. In short, present content in the same order the task is going to be performed. Consistently do that sort of thing. You may be familiar with the phrase, can't see the forest for the trees. The forest is a pattern that needs to be understood before the learner can understand what the trees are. Here's a forest now in the form of a process flow. Now, imagine the learner stepping into this forest, and there's enough here that it may, the learner may become absorbed in. We hope they will become absorbed in this, perhaps to the extent that they forget where they are in the forest/process flow. So up here in the upper right-hand corner, let's put a little icon up here, and not only does this show them the forest, it also shows them where they are in the forest. This Nobel Prize winner observed that neurons that fire together wire together. Kind of sounds like a pattern, don't it? So the situation is that the more the learner understands that forest/process flow as the context for all of the smaller patterns for the trees/steps, the more likely it is they will have those aha moments of, oh, this is how it all fits together. Adult learning theory states that learners learn best when it taps into their interests, their benefits. They get with them. What's in it for me? This is a quick story here going back to my days in middle school when I was an insufferable little gearhead walking around with a hot rod magazine. Our teacher was about what you might expect, kind of unassuming, quiet, and in just totally inexcusable, he drove a Nash Rambler, which was an inauspicious little box with a 4-cylinder engine in it, when a 6-cylinder engine was considered believably wimpy, at least by my friends and myself. So one day he comes into class and asks, who can tell us how to calculate the displacement of a V8 engine? V8 engine, 427, 409, headers, lifters. You want to know about V8 engines? I turned to my buddy Dave. Dave's father was an actual race car driver, so we deferred to him a lot, and he's shaking his head. You can imagine how much we paid attention in that class, and our estimation of this gentleman probably clicked up a couple of notches. Now, go back to the beginning of that scene and imagine the teacher saying, today we are going to learn how to calculate the displacement of a cylindrical object. Open the Hot Rod magazine, close the mind. Regardless of the age of your audience, your learning support is going to be more effective if it ties into what they care about, what their interests are, what will benefit them. I've done a bit since my middle school, including developing training for a medical lab. This was kind of a high turnover situation because a lot of the workers there are on their way to becoming nurses, doctors, surgeons. So when talking about the tools they would be using, I was careful to refer to them as surgical instruments. And the aseptic techniques are the same as required in surgery. So they understood they're not just learning this stepping stone job, but they are learning basic information they will need throughout their medical career. If you worked in sales training, you may be familiar with FAB selling, feature advantage benefit. The anti-lock feature provides the benefit of preventing wheel lockup, giving you, the driver, the benefit of more control in emergency situations. FAB training goes to, back to the theory here, this goes to the benefit of the learner, and it also goes to the relevance of their job. For example, replacing an O-ring right side up delivers the benefit of a tight seal, giving you the benefit of not spewing out expensive cancer drug on the floor. Or that's a little ragged, it would be better stated, installing the O-ring right side up ensures a tight seal that prevents spewing out expensive cancer drug on the floor. Avoiding negative consequences can also be a WIFM. This is a slide for plant operators who have the responsibility of troubleshooting plant automation. They're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff here, and there is a chance of ruining product worth millions of dollars, damaging expensive equipment, or even jeopardizing the lives of patients. So I would hope knowing that would sharpen the senses. Appearing foolish in front of your colleagues, especially if you cause additional work for those colleagues, is also a disincentive. My client really liked this one. Oh, by the way, you are now able to shut down the entire plant by accident. You don't want to do that. So pay attention. Performance objectives are so important. This could be an entire session, if not more. For now, let me just say that Yogi Berra had some very astute observation. Performance objectives are kind of like bookends. In the front, they set up the purpose of the training, and at the end, they are a measure of success. They are a filter up front. If something does not directly support a performance objective, it should not go in. This will help you respond to possible client inclinations to, oh, while we're at it, let's throw this in. No, if it doesn't directly support a performance objective, it doesn't go in. If you want to go back and rewrite the performance objectives, well, you've just blown the timeline and the budget out of the water. At the end, it is a way to objectively evaluate the success of the training. This helps prevent you from going down that rabbit hole of some people like it, some people don't, and they're all using different criteria to judge the success of the training. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of stuff to learn in technical training most often. So I developed two sets of performance objectives. One is the enabling objectives. This is everything the learner needs to know. This is for me, this is for the client, and this is for other people working on it, on the project. But it would probably be meaningless and confusing to show this whole bullet list to the learner. So what goes on the screen for the learner to read is only enough just to let them know what to expect and what they need to learn. Being a ID sometimes means that, oh, by the way, you're also the project manager, or maybe there is not even an acknowledgement that a project manager is needed. After all, it's just training. How hard could that be? Rule number one, know the decision maker. An influencer may have brought you into the project, may be a very nice person, may have approved your script, may really like what you're doing, and when it's all finished, let you know their boss has some revisions that would have been so easy to do early on, and now it's monumental. Gotcha. And that collateral I mentioned in the interview questions, one asks, who has final approval of the finished project? And then in the statement of work, I'll get to in a few minutes, it specifically states this person needs to review and approve every milestone leading up to the finished project. Most people think their ideas are best. So why not let managers and supervisors of your learners think that the learning support you're developing is their idea by involving them in the needs analysis and performance objectives. If you can't get them in a meeting, a focus group would be even better. If not, a survey can work. It can be a short survey. Short may even be better, focusing on the pain points, the things on the screen here that need improvement. Subject matter experts can span the spectrum from really nice, intelligent, easy to work with people to, let me just say, I was happy with when the relationship was over. Nonetheless, respect all of your SMEs with a lot of respect by valuing their time. The way I do this is when describing our working relationship, I begin the description by to make the best use of your time. Never would I say or write the way I do things or the protocol we need to follow. Everything is positioned as being of help to the subject matter expert. Then actually do it. Do your homework. Avoid broad questions such as, well, tell me how the entire procedure works. Study the work instructions, standard operating procedures, anything you can get your hands on so you can ask specific intelligent questions. In your collateral information are a lot of suggested questions to ask, such as what is on the screen here. And these, as I mentioned earlier, focus on what are the mistakes, the problems, what needs to be done better. This helps to position you as key to improving key performance indicators, KPIs. Management likely improve KPIs. Need I say career advancement here? Get expectations in writing with a statement of work and SOW to confirm what they meant to say when they said what they did say. So even for a small project like, hey, can you just jazz up this PowerPoint for me? There can be broad misunderstanding on that, the type style to use, the color, the diversity, animation. And when they say, don't worry about the wording, worry about the wording, at least to the extent that it says specifically in the SOW, there will be no editing of the wording. Again, in your collateral is an example SOW that lists all of the things that can come up and bite you later on in a project if you don't nail them down at the beginning of the project in your statement of work. There can be some gray area between the SOW and a style guide, but you need a style guide to specify the color spectrum, the type style you're using, the look and feel, are you using video or not, who goes on camera. And if you're asked to just follow the corporate guideline, corporate style guide, that needs to be stated in your style guide. It's a lot easier to change things on paper or in a word processor than it is in Articulate Storyline or whatever development technology you're using. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, that decision maker needs something to approve, read and approve. And if you're going to put closed captions and transcripts in your WBT, your web-based training, it's a lot easier to have something from which you can copy and paste than to have to manually enter every single word during the heat of development. Learners are often introduced to a subject with a WBT, a web-based training. The most important decisions are structure. There are basically two approaches to structure, feature-driven and task-driven. Feature-driven is just a tour of the controls. Click S to save, click P to print. This is often very self-referential. The name of the control is what it does. In short, it's absolutely nothing the learner will ever do on the job. It's just a bunch of random facts that, like as I demonstrated earlier, are difficult to remember as neural pathways. because they don't create neural pathways. Task-driven is exactly what the learner will be doing on the job. These are the neural pathways that are needed. Which is not to badmouth feature-driven, because feature-driven is exactly what you need in your reference material. If the learner on the job needs to know what a doohickey is, he or she better have a quick and easy way to get a description of a doohickey, and a picture of a doohickey would be lovely. In short, task-driven to learn the job, feature-driven to use on the job. Tasks follow a pattern of steps. So you may counter that by saying, doesn't the learner need to know something in order to know what they need to know in the way of terminologies, formulas, concepts, consequences, guidelines? And don't I need to present that first before the actual steps? The answer is define first. If you do this at the very beginning of training, the learner is likely to forget it by the time they need it. These types of things need to be presented at the last possible moment, right before the learner needs it. For example, here is a quick lesson on C&D blocks. And notice that if the learner already knows this stuff, they just click next and go on to the next slide. But the reason they need to learn this now is because in the very next slide, they are going to need to understand the basics of what a C&D block is and how it's used. So we are going back to theory here. We are showing the learner the benefit of learning this bit of kind of abstract information because it is directly relevant to the job that they will be doing once they're doing that job. Especially in systems or software training, there are often different ways to do the same thing. So are you doing the learner a favor by showing them alternate ways to do the same? A well-written performance objective is how to do a task, not how to waste a bunch of time on decisions that don't make any difference. Just take a look at this thing here. Try that. Okay, this is complicated. Each of the options includes facts that need to be understood and a decision to make, and it just creates cognitive load. It's better to keep it simple and show the learner only one way to do things. Later on, maybe once this way is internalized, there may be a reason to show options if in this different situation, the option is better. But when you're initially creating that neural pathway, that pattern, keep it simple with only one way to do things. Learners today are informed, informal, and in a hurry. Being informal, it's best to keep things crisp and conversational, which is to say second person, present tense, active voice. Quick little story here. You may have been around long enough to understand that some people in positions of authority shouldn't really be there. In this situation, I was reporting to somebody who didn't know much about learning support, didn't want to learn, and somewhere along the line was probably told, in business, all writing must be formal, third person, and passive voice. Well, we went back and forth on this a little bit until I realized who approves my time sheet. Then shortly thereafter, they brought in a high-powered consultant to tell us how to do the jobs that we were already doing. Virtually the first words out of her mouth were, to double the effectiveness of your learning support, use second person. The word you has power. It wakes up the learner. It lets them know, yeah, you need to know this. You will need to do this on the job, not some vague third person to be identified later. In short, your reading or your recording, if you're recording something, needs to be a casual conversation, as if you were talking to an individual or a small group rather than hundreds of people out there in the audience. I go so far as to imagine a learner on the other side of my computer monitor. I'll even give him a name. So when I have some content to develop, I will have a conversation with Bill to explain the content to him. Then I will just write down what I explained to Bill. Navigation needs to be simple, intuitive, and consistent. Click next is simple, intuitive, and consistent. You will find people railing against click next. It is unimaginative. It is boring, which is just another way of saying simple, intuitive, and consistent. I would contend that it's ideas, maybe some of you in the audience, who are bored with click next and just want to find some fancy way to show off their creativity. But think about it. We want the learner using brain cells to learn content, not figure out how to get to the next slide. Every rule has exceptions. In this case, if you are showing the learner what they will be seeing on the job, and you want them to confirm they know where something is on the screen or where things are in their working environment, have them click on those things to prove that they know it before you move forward. Or you can put together an actual simulation where they have to do exactly what they're doing on the job, reinforcing those neural networks, those neural pathways to figure out how to get to the next slide. Here is a step in the process. Notice that adult learning theory states that adults need control. So this lets them read what this step is just as quickly or as slowly as they would like, and then they can play the video when they are good and ready to play the video.
Doff your gloves.
Once the video
then
starts,
apply sanitizer with your finger.
Be quiet, John. Okay, they're able to pause the video. They are able to jump around in the video, see it anywhere, go back and review whatever they want. They're even able to play the video at different speeds. Articulate Storyline lets you do that. It's a very nice program. And then they can go on to the next slide when they're good and ready. The take home here is it's best to avoid automatically timing something when you assume that the learner has had enough time to read it or absorb it. Whatever timing you select, it's going to be too fast for some learners and too slow for others, and it will be confusing for all of them. If you're a musician, especially if you're just learning, this is probably a very important phrase to you. It's a mnemonic. The first letter of those words are the lines in a treble staff. Acronyms, abbreviations, little poems, cute sayings have been proven very effective in helping learners remember stuff. How about this one? You know what that is? Maybe. This is the international symbol system of units. For example, kilogram, hectogram, all the way down to milligram. Silly, right? Silly, good. Silly evokes amusement. Amusement is a emotion, and the brain stores emotions and memory in the same areas. This gets deep pretty quick because different things are remembered in different places of the brain. But the take home is things are better remembered if they evoke an emotion, trigger, say, pride in acknowledging somebody as a member of an important group or doing an important job, trigger joy and relief at getting a review question correct, trigger satisfaction by completing the lesson, trigger compassion in knowing that their colleagues or their customer or their patient is relying on them to do their best. Analogies work very well. Most people know the basics of how a body, the human body works. So let's map that over to a bioreactor, which is something used in creating pharmaceuticals by growing cells, just as those cells would grow in the human body. So rather than describing aspects of the bioreactor in the abstract, compare them to what goes on in the human body, which the learner already understands. I mentioned earlier, it's more effective to focus on common problems, pain points, things that need improvement. Management would like improved. There are a lot of steps in aseptic technique. Which steps are most often not followed? Well, let's make those big and bright rather than burying them in a gray list of a whole bunch of bullet points. I mentioned reference material, and that things such as web addresses, specifications, specifics that a learner is not likely to remember be offloaded into reference material. which creates the obligation of introducing that reference material in the WBT along with how to use it. This is content that not only introduces this job aid, it also lets the user take a look at exactly what they will be using on the job. This is a review question that can't be answered until the user actually goes into the manual they will be using on the job to find the answer to that question. Similar in this situation, the answer to this was already given in the content. The users probably or may have forgotten it by now. So let's just make this an open book reference review question, and they can use exactly what they will have to use on the job to answer it. Let's take a guess at an equal might be a good guess there. Click submit, and this creates a teachable moment. The learner wants to know, well, if I got it wrong, what's the right answer? And rather than having them puzzle on this very long, let's just go back to the content, and here's the answer down here. Oh, it needs a colon in front of the equal point, equal. So let's try it again. Put a colon in there, and let's see. Okay, got it right. We can move along now. Simulations are just a natural for systems training, for software training. This can be a interface tour showing what they will be seen on the job in terms of what is where, what they're called, what they do, that sort of thing. And even better, you can do a click-along simulation where the user will be doing exactly what they're doing on the job, reinforcing those neural pathways. In this case, it says right-click something. I will click in the wrong place, and you will notice that this is on trainer wheels. So it shows the learner what they should have clicked when they click what they did click. So we'll click that, and another teachable moment. You made a mistake. The instructions were to right click. So I'll right click there, and look what happens. We move along, click the wrong thing again. Okay, I'll click again, and nothing happens because the instructions are to double click. What you need to do on the job is double click this thing, and we move along. Videos, one of the most powerful tools we have in our quiver of effective learning design stuff, if used properly. This is a sterile field within a biosafety cabinet. Are you doing the learner a favor by showing this in a video? Which is just not, unless the video is showing how this is set up. This is another step in what you saw earlier. And if the learner clicks this, they see a motion
your
video.
First overglove,
now,
grasping the
do you think you're doing the learner a favor by letting them see this as a motion video? Which suggests, yes, being able to see the turn of the wrist, the angle of the elbow, takes this information directly into a neural pathway without having to translate it into words. Shoot horizontal. Computer monitors are horizontal. TVs are horizontal. Your eyeballs are side by side. Yet people are so used to holding their digital device vertical, a lot of video gets shot that way. Don't do it. It doesn't cut together well, doesn't take full advantage of the screen real estate. Unless there is a compelling reason, or you just want to be ironic, shoot horizontal. Said earlier that content in short-term memory needs to be moved into long-term with effortful recall. Review questions. Here is an example of first, this is a chunk of content here, just enough to fill up short-term memory. And then we get to review questions here, pointing out that they are neither graded nor recorded, so there's no pressure on the learner. They can relax and learn stuff. Multiple choice questions, multiple select questions, true and false are fine. This is a perfectly good way to reinforced neural pathways. Even better is to show the learner what they will see on the job. In this case, at the end of a procedure, they have a number of buttons that they will come in contact with. If they click that one and submit, they are not only told they're wrong, they're also reminded that, oh, by the way, you turned off something and your colleagues are waiting to get back to work. So they get to try again. Kevin, I see you. I hope you haven't had your hand raised for a long time.
No, no, not too long. But I wanted to mention something about the portrait versus landscape aspect ratios in videos. Yeah, so horizontal or landscape is the more common and more preferred.
Yeah,
However, there is starting to be a trend for more mobile learning, watching videos on phones, and
right.
if the learning is intended for that, or that's where primarily your audience is going to be learning from, you may want to consider a vertical video for that. It's because when people are holding their phones or walking, they want to hold them in their hands easily and take this learning. It's just a much better application. But I know it's kind of a niche, but it is something to consider when choosing aspect ratios.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if that's what the training is about, using a your digital object, it would be much better idea to show exactly what you're talking about rather than stay horizontal. So thank you very much for that. Let me see, where were we? We were down to chunk and review here. I was suggesting that it's best to show exactly what the user will be doing on the job. Here's another example that the user will use the exact job aid. Here they have to answer this question, they have to open the same job aids they will be using on the job to know which of these little boxes to check. And then when they get it wrong, they are not only told what it should be, they are also told why it should be the way it should be. Consistency is critical when reinforcing neural pathways. Some people think trick questions are a good idea. It makes them think. Well, thinking is good, but our performance objective is to learn how is to do a task, and it helps the learner to make this as simple as possible. So when doing review questions, when doing assessment questions, it's best to have the wording you use in the question exactly the same as the wording the learner read in the content or heard in the content to help more effectively reinforce those neural pathways. At some point, the learner goes on to the job, actually OJT, learning on the job. You may be familiar with this pie chart, and I would suggest you take it with a certain amount of skepticism, as you should any survey that shows results in even multiples of 10. How can it be that, regardless of how smart somebody is, what their aptitude is, what they already know about the content, how complicated the content is, everybody learns the same way learns the same thing in the same way. However, the point made here is still valid, that we learn a lot from experience. And if you are showing a learner how to do something, or if the trainer implementing your design is showing the learner how to do something, who is getting the experience? Not the person who needs it. During OJT training, it's important that the learner have their fingers on the keyboard, their butt in the operator's seat. And it would be best to make this a conversation rather than a lecture. Ask the learner, what do you think would be, what would you do next? Why would you do it that way? What are the consequences of not doing it that way? To get a back and forth with the learner to create a little bit more interactivity. This video has been around for a while, so if you've already seen it, please play along, take a look.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Are you able to hear that all right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, here we go.
The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla? For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half miss the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events. And that's the monkey business illusion. Learn more about this illusion and the original gorilla experiment at theinvisiblegorilla.com.
Learners see what they look for. So the more complex a operation, a task, the more times they have to see it, the more times they have to practice it and do it. It's a function of cognitive load. Each time through, they can concentrate on only one thing, so they need to do that. Reinforce, practice a little, see something, another thing, reinforce, practice until they can see the gorilla, see the curtain change, and see the girl leave every time they go through that task. You may have heard this, seen it. What's wrong with this? What happens if the learner is doing it wrong and practicing it over and over? The truth is practice makes permanent. So the instructional design for the OJT trainer, it's very important for coaching to be early and robust. So what is being practiced is being done right from the start. A quick story here about my time at Kaiser Permanente. A field trainer came in to say one of his learners was very angry at being called a doctor. This guy said, "I am not a doctor, I am a surgeon." The take home here being that some surgeons have a very high opinion of themselves, a opinion they felt was threatened when it was suggested they use checklists. Their response was, "How dare you question me? I am a trained, experienced professional." Well, a few mere doctors did some studies, and they showed that conclusively that without a checklist, more patients died. Can't argue with body count. Today, most, if not all, surgeries are done with a checklist. Pilots of jet airliners use a checklist. Your learners should be using a checklist, and your OJT trainers to give them a job aid to learn. Okay, a checklist, good idea for a primary job aid. Just knowing how to do something does not automatically mean knowing how to train. And as you may be painfully aware, too often somebody who is a skilled worker is asked to train somebody else without being trained on how to train. Maybe you don't have any influence over that, but you can at least provide a checklist as we mentioned, and that checklist would be the performance objectives. So this once again proves the importance of having good performance objectives. This would be the enabling objectives that we mentioned earlier, a checklist of everything that the learner needs to know before they go out on the job. Okay, stop. Let's get real. You are not paying enough attention. You are wasting your time, and you are wasting my time. Oh my, what just happened? If you are like most humans receiving negative feedback, your brain is probably churning through all the reasons that your behavior has been exemplary and mine has been totally unacceptable. There was back in the dark ages of tough coaches, there was a mystique about getting tough and being hard-nosed because it got results that are a fraction of the results that can be obtained with positive feedback. So OJT trainers need to understand that FAIL is an acronym for first attempt in learning, and learners make mistakes. Nobody likes to hear, "No, you're wrong." So the collateral includes a number of suggestions on how to correct in a positive fashion. Take a moment to read these. If you have other suggestions, you can write them in the chat window there to share with others if you care to do that. One of the primary reasons that learning does not be successful is lack of manager support. As I mentioned earlier, good idea to involve managers in needs analysis and objectives to make it their work rather than something imposed from above. Then let them know that they have been heard with reports on what the consensus was on what the chosen needs analysis and performance objectives were. Then, as you go along, provide progress reports, at least to the extent of letting them know when the learning will be available and how it will be delivered. Then on launch, make a big deal of it, at least with an email going out to managers and supervisors, letting them know the benefit to the organization of this learning support, and more importantly, benefit to them personally to have better trained employees. After the training, good idea to give the manager and supervisor suggested prompt questions to have a debrief with the learners. This could be a single learner, or will probably work even better with a group of learners who can compare observations. Again, take a look at these questions. They are in your collateral. And if you have a suggestion you would want to share, one of your favorites, that could go in the chat window. Team meetings can be an important part of continuing learning. The way this works and how to make it work is in your collateral, is each team meeting contains a discussion of a single skill, technique, or aspect of a task. And this needs to be a conversation rather than a lecture. And then the manager makes an assignment for the next meeting, which is to pay attention to one aspect of your job, come back prepared to discuss it. Just as repetition reinforces neural pathways, lack of repetition makes them fade away. So it's just common sense to have your LMS repeat lessons that are not of knowledge that is not used frequently, such as location of safety equipment, quarterly annual reports. Have the LMS automatically assign this type of training immediately before it is needed. Rather than an entire lesson, it's very effective to refresh single questions. This can be a review question, an assessment question sent out by email to everyone who has taken the training. This creates a teachable moment. The feedback pays off that teachable moment. I know that using Google Forms, you can make this anonymous, so no pressure on the learner. They can take their time to get the feedback, but at the same time, the results can be aggregated to give you data on what's going on out there. So you get a twofer here. At the same time, you're reinforcing knowledge, you're collecting data on gaps in knowledge, any mistakes being made, inconsistency in worker knowledge, and very important here, need for additional learning support. That means job security. This is the kind of stuff that you and I do. These refresher questions can be set up all at once and then automated to go out on a regular basis. Every now and then, good idea to review the questions, add what's appropriate, revive what needs to be revised. And if everybody is getting the right question all the time, you might want to delete the question. In summary, learners want you to just tell them what to do, and it helps if they know why they are doing it that way. Humans are pattern-seeking animals, so present information in the same pattern consistently. Data dumps don't work. Information needs to be chunked, reinforced with effortful recall, and then practice to integrate it into the learner's knowledge base. Involve managers and supervisors so they buy into the learning support and see it as responding to their needs and their ideas. Support OJT trainers with checklists, performance objectives, and encourage them to use positive feedback. So what you think? Did you see anything, hear anything new? Let me de-share my screen here.
I appreciated the validation that data dumps don't work because everyone in my organization, I think it comes with the time scarcity mentality where it's like, I only have these people at this time on this day. So everything, even though it's not effective, it just, but I particularly, for me, what I found valuable were more the actual suggestions of ways to follow up and reinforce and kind of those different methods.
Absolutely. And as often as I suggest that to clients, as you said, we only have them for this. Let's
We don't have time.
pour in as much as we possibly can. So do you want them to leave confused about everything, or do you want them to know something?
I wanted to mention something about that inattentive blindness. The whole gorilla monkey business.
Oh yeah,
thing. Yeah. There was there's some more research on that, on how people have an organized, or there's a hierarchy of attentiveness that we have, that sometimes, and it's a subconscious processing that people will sometimes oftentimes they'll see that gorilla or monkey walking across the screen, but they won't necessarily remember it or put attention to it unless that gorilla is doing something that indicates that it needs attention, and sometimes that's done after it is perceived. So like they've done research in which the gorilla went by quicker, faster, and showed a bit of like a danger impulse was there, and then people were seeing it much more, and that sometimes that danger impulse would be indicated after the gorilla had passed, and then that raised the results of how many people saw the gorilla. So it was actually a post perception re-identification that occurred. So what that says to me is that if you indicate something, if there's a possibility of something falling into that level of inattentive blindness, if you put an added level of stakes or importance behind it, that inattentive blindness will diminish after the fact. So it's kind of interesting.
Exactly, like that emotion thing. Things that evoke emotion are more likely to be remembered. And what you were saying reminds me that sometimes I can be reading something and all of a sudden realize that I don't know what I just read. My eyes and my brain saw every single word, but I don't know what I just read.
However, I've had the opposite effect sometimes, where I've read something and not understood it until afterwards, where I'm recalling it, and then it makes sense because I see, that is actually important. It's lesser. It doesn't happen as much, but it does happen.
Right. You know it, but it's not going into long-term memory because you don't appreciate the importance of what you just read.
I'm always advocating to limit the amount of information sent out in training, because that's always what stakeholders want, is more information in less time. But I'm always trying to push back on that, but that's a constant challenge. I think that I don't think I'm ever going to win.
Never ceases to amaze me. In training and education, people put down their good money and ask, give me the least you possibly can. I have never had anybody object to a session ending too soon, or being in a college class that, the teacher didn't show. Oh, hooray, we get to go home. I just blew my tuition for nothing. Heidi, thank you very much for your
You are welcome. Thank you,
help.
John.
I would have just ignored completely all the people who were coming. And now, Karen, thank you for staying with us here. I appreciate seeing you again.
I got to head out, but thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Excellent.
Hope you're doing well.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye. And you too, thank you very much for your help. And
all right, great. Have a good one, John. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.